Hey folks, so by now you've learned how to play Eclipse, you're getting ready for your first game, maybe you're feeling a little apprehensive as to how it's going to go, or maybe you've played it a time or two and are just having some trouble with it. Well, that's why I'm here. These are my top 5 beginner strategy tips for Eclipse. There are 3 things you can do to make the game a bit more beginner friendly. Play as humans, don't use warp portals, and give the NPCs their basic blueprints. Now, I know a lot of people go into games thinking, I want the real experience, I don't want to play with training wheels, but that shouldn't really apply here. Yes, those optional rules may add a bit more complexity, but your game won't really suffer for the lack of them. And if you play as humans, you'll have a great starting sector and a strong trade rate. There's nothing really unique about them, but you'll have a bit more wiggle room in which to learn the fundamentals. So as opposed to a lot of other games in this genre, Eclipse isn't really something you can make some intricate plan for at the very beginning. Because most of the map hasn't been set up and most of the tech tiles haven't been put out, you don't know exactly what kind of gaming experience you're going to have. Adapting to your circumstances is really important. So if you have a plan in mind, but the map tiles or the tech tiles just aren't flipping your way, it's okay to switch gears early on. Now, after a couple of rounds, you should have a better idea of the path that you're taking, but until then, it's okay to see what you get and work from there. Exploring should probably be your first action, and maybe your second. You can't really go anywhere or fight anyone at the very beginning, and the techs that are available that you can afford at the beginning of the game aren't so important that you need to snatch them up. What is important is setting your home neighborhood, because that is going to be there for the rest of the game. Now, when you're putting out a tile, there are a couple things to look for. Can I take this now or soon? And if so, is it worth it? And how are the wormholes going to connect me to my neighbors? When you're starting the game, getting resources is really important. So if you flip up a double ancient tile, you might not want to keep that one. And setting the wormholes in a way that's going to help you out is important for setting your strategy. Because let's say you want to be aggressive. If so, then you want to make sure that your wormholes are going to be able to connect to your opponents so that you can go towards them and fight. But if you want to turtle up, you want to do the opposite. You want to make sure that the blank sides are are closer to your opponents so that you're setting up a kind of firewall to keep them out. While it's tempting to only get in fights when you have an overwhelming advantage and the target is of strategic importance, you should also be on the lookout for smaller opportunities. Maybe you get a new gun and you put it on your ships before the opponent has a chance to respond to that. That could be enough to tip the scales in your favor. And while getting an early lead is not a guarantee of victory, it sure doesn't hurt. Basically, don't be reckless, but don't be afraid to get in fights early on. Even if you don't win, if you can take a ship or two with you, you have a pretty good chance of drawing a 3 or 4 point reputation tile. And the earlier you get into fights, the better chance that those high value targets will still be in the bag. Eclipse is not just a resource management economic engine builder, nor is it just a strategic war game. You need to balance both aspects of it if you want to win. Now, even if you're just building backwards, trying to turtle up, be very defensive, well, you still need a hard shell in order to keep your opponents out. It's really easy to forget to upgrade your ships until it's too late, so try to keep an eye on the strength of your opponent's blueprints and stay in fighting shape. Alternately, even if you're going really aggressively, you're on the offensive, you're maybe taking a lot of enemy systems, you still need to keep your economy afloat. If you don't, you might end up losing all those systems that you took, or opponents might out-science you and then come back with stronger ships with which they can counterattack. You can lean a little bit harder on one strategy versus the other, but you need to be able to do both. And those are my top 5 beginner strategy tips for Eclipse. Now, if you have any great strategy tips that you like to use, or just any advice that you want to give people, please tell me about them in the comments below. I leaned pretty heavily on a few BGG articles when I was writing this, and if you want a much more in-depth discussion of strategy and gameplay, I have linked them in the description. So go and check that out. It was very helpful for me. I think it could be helpful for you as well. Also, if you want to watch some gameplay, I did a run-through and final thoughts over on Rahdo's channel, so take a look at that while you're at it. Now, lastly, I want to thank so much my Patreon backers, people who support the channel and who are getting to watch this video a month before anybody else. So if you want early access to videos like this and to help me decide which games I teach, please consider heading over to the Patreon and pledging $1 or $2. Either way, though, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.